Margaret sat at her kitchen table staring at the calendar on the wall. The red marker circled around today's date seemed heavier than all the other days. 60. It was such a big number, and though she smiled at the thought of all the years she had lived, a part of her felt the quiet ache of time passing by. She had raised her children, welcomed grandchildren, and built a life she was proud of, but birthdays had a way of making her reflective. She smoothed the tablecloth and checked the clock. In just a couple of hours, her family would arrive. Her daughter, Emily, had promised to bring a cake. Her son, Daniel, was driving up from out of town. Even her younger grandchildren had been whispering about balloons and decorations. Margaret felt grateful. Yet, behind all the joy, she knew there would be one empty chair. That chair belonged to Aaron, her stepgrandson. She hadn't seen him in years. He had moved away after high school, following opportunities that took him across the country. Letters and calls became less frequent, and eventually, silence filled the space where his presence used to be. Margaret never admitted it to anyone, but she missed him dearly. He had once been the boy who followed her around the garden, asking endless questions about life, love, and dreams. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Emily and the children spilled into the house, their arms full of brightly wrapped presents and a bakery box with a sweet, sugary smell. Margaret hugged them tightly, letting their laughter fill the room. Soon, Daniel arrived too, carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. The house grew warmer with every new arrival, and Margaret felt her heart swelling with love. The evening carried on with music playing softly in the background, little ones running around the living room, and adults exchanging stories over steaming cups of coffee. Margaret cut the cake, her eyes misting as her grandchildren sang happy birthday. She told herself that it was enough, that her heart was full. But then came the knock at the door. It was gentle, almost hesitant, but it cut through the room. Everyone turned. Margaret's heart skipped. She wasn't expecting anyone else. Daniel got up to answer, and as the door swung open, a silence fell. Standing in the doorway was Aaron. He looked older now, no longer the teenager she remembered but a young man in his early 20s. His hair was longer, his jaw more defined, but his eyes, the same warm brown eyes, held the same depth. He clutched a small, neatly wrapped gift in his hands and offered a nervous smile. "Hi, Grandma," he said softly, his voice carrying both hesitation and longing. For a moment, Margaret couldn't move. Emotion swelled so suddenly that she had to grip the edge of the table. Then, without a word, she crossed the room and pulled him into her arms. The years melted away in that embrace. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she could feel his shoulders shaking against hers. "You came back," she whispered. "I couldn't miss your birthday," he replied. The room erupted into warmth and chatter. The younger children crowded around him, asking a million questions, and Emily wiped her eyes as she welcomed him back. Margaret guided Aaron to the table, insisting he eat cake, insisting he sit, insisting he belonged. He laughed softly, clearly overwhelmed, but his presence lit the room in a way nothing else could. As the evening wound down, Aaron finally slid the gift across the table. "This is for you," he said quietly. Margaret opened it carefully. Inside was a wooden frame holding an old photograph, one of the two of them in her garden when he was just a boy, holding a basket of flowers. Next to it was a folded letter. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. In his handwriting, Aaron had written about how much she had meant to him, how her kindness and guidance had shaped him into the man he was. He apologized for the distance, for the silence, and he promised that he wanted to rebuild the bond they had lost. By the time she finished reading, tears blurred the words. She looked up to see Aaron watching her anxiously. Without hesitation, she pulled him close again. "This," she whispered, holding the letter to her chest, "is the greatest gift I've ever received." The family gathered closer, their arms wrapping around one another. Even the youngest grandchildren, who didn't fully understand the weight of the moment, clung to the embrace. That night, the candles burned lower, the cake plates emptied, but what lingered most was the sense of healing, of love restored. Margaret knew that 60 was just a number, and though time marched on, the gift she received, reconnect ion, forgiveness, and family, was timeless. In the days that followed, Aaron became a regular presence again. He joined Sunday dinners, helped in the garden, and even sat with Margaret to hear the old stories she loved to tell. She realized that sometimes the most precious gifts in life were not the ones wrapped in paper, but the ones that arrived when you least expected them, carrying the power to change everything. And for Margaret, her 60th birthday would forever be remembered as the night her family became whole again.